Welcome to the Buy Box Bandits podcast.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Buy Box Bandits podcast. Today we have a long-awaited episode with the man Nick Spisak, who's doing 6 figures a month on Amazon part-time. He is a perfect case study for what a lot of you guys that currently have a career are looking to do with this stuff, right? So we're going to dive into some good stuff in terms like getting started, getting that initial momentum, the scaling process, delegation, building products outside of Amazon, and then time management. Like I know a lot of you guys, especially who are interested in stuff, you're not really sure what it's going to take, doing it really successfully with your full-time job as well. But Nick, take us back to the beginning, man. How'd you get into selling on Amazon? Tell us about the early days.
How we doing, gents? So I go back as an eBay OG back in 1999 as a young.
Jeez.
So fired up the parents' eBay account, kind of stole that one. And first flips were back at the Adidas outlet in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Oh, I was born and raised there too, man.
Miles and I have hit that place up a few times, I think.
Of course, yeah.
Oh yeah, back corner on the side, and they're track shoes. I think size 13. So that was the OG flip. And fast forward a couple decades, things just kind of came around. We were back around in the COVID time frame, and my sister-in-law was like, "Hey, these PlayStations, they're going really expensive." And then the light bulb moment, that inception moment, kind of kicked in and blended the IT world, the botting world, and started saying, "Hey, there might be an opportunity here where we can flip some of them." So that was what really sparked the interest to kind of get back into thinking about reselling products and getting on that journey.
So as a corporate professional, right, which a lot of our listeners are, take us through that sort of mental shift the first couple months, right? Because it's a big paradigm shift in terms of like having a boss, having team members to work with, going into the office, all these sorts of things. And now you're online working with a bunch of people you don't know, probably younger, and it's a completely different thing than what you're used to doing.
You're a beginner again, right? You're literally square.
Yeah.
So I don't know how any of this stuff works.
Take us through the first 2 months of like starting to kind of shift that focus. I mean, obviously you haven't quit, but like the shift.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Like the longer you're in a corporate environment, some of those limiting beliefs become your day-to-day standards, right? So I think the first thing was seeing that first light, the first success, the first product that was there. And some of it kind of came as innate, just like having a background in athletics. I know we've talked about that on a couple
of huge, bro. So huge, yeah.
You see the longer play with it, you're not going to have like the instant success. And first time picking up a baseball, you knew you weren't going to do it well. Like,
Miles, he was a big body baseball player back in the day.
I got the text about the Hall of Fame induction. Of course I did.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing, is just kind of going in with the mindset that it's not going to be an overnight thing, and taking it with small wins. So when we kind of started the journey with it, I had a conversation with my wife, and both of us are former athletes, and we either don't do it or we do it 100%. Like there's no in between on that. So it was the conversation like, hey, are we going to do this? Like, because this is going to be a commitment. And she was on board. So that was kind of where we went, and we started going down the path of, all right, we'll commit 8 p.m. to midnight every night. And we'll do that for a period of 6 months and reevaluate and see if it's something that either pivot or keep going. And that's kind of where the journey started.
I really like what you said about picking out that 6-month period, right? Because you obviously day to day, you can get stuff done, but where you're going to see the big gains with the stuff, if you're a beginner, is going to be over a period of months, because you could sit here and do 24 hours straight today, but there's certain things that literally just don't exist today. Certain buy costs with OA, certain deals, etc., that over a 6-month period usually happen. And they usually happen multiple times. And that gives you multiple chances to come back, take advantage, learn, innovate, etc. Right? So that's what we always say, man. It's such a good way to think about it. So, okay, that first 6-month period, which I believe was February of last year, just about a year ago, talk through, okay, in March, XYZ thing happened. That gave me a boost of confidence. Or back to school is when I really took off. Like, give us kind of an illustration of like how it evolved and such.
So a lot of it came from both of your guys' content, right? So there's certain things that you guys already set the blueprint. Follow the blueprint and go from there. So once you get the first product, that's a first win. Think of each of them as little incremental wins. There was plenty of nights I wasn't finding products, but I knew it was going to come eventually. So kind of getting into that mindset to say, okay, get the first product. Then it was, hey, this keep it chart, this is the first time you look at one, you're like, what is this, right? But just continuing to have that feedback loop to ask the questions. All right, now I understand this aspect. And it just becomes muscle memory, just like anything else that you do. So I think that was the second milestone, is when I could look at a keep it chart and be able to say, okay, now I can disqualify products. Garrett talks about that all the time, right? How do you go through and get through the losing products quicker so that way you can find the winning ones? That was the second key milestone. The third one was the group chats. And that was the biggest one, right? Being able to
Shout out Joe, shout out Mitch.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, like that, and that's key, because you hear it from everything you've been preaching with Miles. You hear it when Mr. Beast talked about it with some of his content, where, hey, now I'm only making one mistake, and I got a group of other people that
Wait,
have
dig in on that though, because that's my entire thesis though. They need to hear it from you too.
So when you go through that, you're going to have different things that you're going to hit an issue on. So spread it with the rest of the squad, the people that you're in the trenches with. You're building. Billy talked about this, right? Build your own lunch table, right? So your group chat is your lunch table. You're starting with someone there. You're not going to jump into someone else's lunch table that has been established there for a couple years. Start your own, and then eventually you'll get to a point where now you're starting to interact with some of those other ones. So I think that was the next key milestone, was feeling comfortable, one, that, hey, you can share some of this information, and guess what? You're going to be farther along. Like, that was a limiting mindset that I had before starting this journey, that now when I look at it, it's totally different in that regard. Yeah, okay, if I keep that knowledge to myself, okay, maybe I get this one deal, but I just missed out on potentially exponential deals because I wasn't sharing with a select few of like-minded individuals on the exact same journey that you're going through, just like being on a team in sports.
So no, you've had sort of like the employee mindset for quite some time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're unique in the sense that you've had success with the employee mindset. You've had success with the entrepreneur, self-employed business owner mindset. Do you think anyone can make that transition? Like, do you think the ability to be a successful entrepreneur is inherent? Do you think it's learned? Do you think it's a little bit of both? Do you think it's just like, if you want to do it, you will do it? Because you're one of the few that have had success in both worlds.
I think there's shades of gray, right? I think it comes down to the innate quality that someone has, is they just want it, right? That's something that you're kind of born with. You have an aspect inside of you. It might come off as cockiness, but the reality of it, it's just an internal confidence. Like, you want something for yourself. There's a bigger picture for family or whatever those goals that you're going after. And I feel like that's the trait, right? You might be in a corporate environment, but if you're willing to get after it, you're willing to have a vision and see something through, there's no reason you can't make that change. And that's been the journey over the last year. So you take Amazon as the example. Now you can apply that to other items, starting to look into other aspects of being a founder and a business owner. Last year, I wouldn't have tackled those things because I wasn't thinking in that mindset. Now, is it hard? Of course it's hard. That's the whole point. That's why it's fun. But now you can use those lessons learned over the previous year to apply the same fundamentals, regardless of whatever the venture that you're getting into, because at the end of the day, they're the same types of things, just you're applying it to a new opportunity or a new different thing that you might want to get into, or a passion.
Yeah, I
That's
like
something I
what you
think Dylan talks about really, really well. And we
really
have
well.
actually just interviewed him.
Yeah, I
Don't-
liked what you were saying about thinking how, like, just coming from a scarcity mindset. And I think the kind of like bigger thesis around that is that typically people are dealing with more local economies or more small games, and that like they might be in like a corporate system where they're on like a small team and such. There might not be a ton of room to grow up. The cool thing about having your own business just in general, whether it's Amazon or elsewhere, is that you can see, literally, you can, if we're talking super tactical on Amazon, you can see an example of a storefront with 1,000 reviews, probably making, 30, 40, 80 grand profit a month, whatever. You can see how frequently their reviews are coming, and you can literally see the whole breakdown. You can see exactly what they're selling. You see people on Twitter, whatever, that are saying like really weird banter and stuff like that. Those people are cleaning up, right? If you see, and it's possible too. And it's just transferring that idea that it's going to move a lot quicker if I have other people I can get along with and talk to. Now, you have quite literally, most people don't have excuses. At least my young college kids, especially, they love saying they don't have time. That makes no sense to me. But
Or
you
job that they
actually
hate.
have responsibility, like job, kids, etc. Right? So you have every reason to not have a personal brand, every reason to not get after it and network with the boys, etc. Right? How do you actually make that happen though? Because you've done a really good job of it. Relatively, I'm sure it hasn't been easy, but it's looked very natural and such, right? I think in the way that I would assume it looked natural for me to other folks as well and such. But like, what kind of like inspired you to do that? And like, talk about how you actually make that happen though, because that's what a lot of people I think are confused about.
I think the biggest item, and both you guys will relate to, is you just get started with it. The first post is terrible. The first video is terrible, and then you just keep building on it a little bit from there, and you feel a little bit more comfortable. Now there are aspects for folks that are coming from a corporate environment that skill set translates very well. If you're
Miles, we were just talking about this in regards to Nick.
What's that?
How Nick like talks really well on camera because he
Oh
has that
yes,
sort of
we
like,
were. Yes, dude.
I don't know where we were
Absolutely.
talking
Yeah,
about, but I was
yeah,
like, yeah, because Nick has to put the
facts
the,
though.
the corporate hat on in meetings. He's like, we'll
Yeah,
touch
man.
base soon, we'll follow up, all the buzzwords.
And that's actually a tangent I want to talk about with working with entrepreneurs, especially in the Amazon community, is it brings a fresh mindset. So a lot of the folks in our group are younger than me. There's a different type of lingo that's in there. There's like, it doesn't matter the environment you're in, there's going to be a lingo, a way of talking, a way of a perspective. So the first time I heard Chad, I was like, what the heck are people even freaking talking? Who's this Chad guy? Right. So, but you get to hear different perspectives of things, different ways of thinking it through. So I would actually challenge too for younger folks that are in their entrepreneurial journey. If you do have someone that comes from a corporate background, tap in and find where's the commonalities between it, because there are skill sets that I've learned from being in the corporate environment that do translate really well. Being on camera, it's no different than giving a presentation, right? How do you get a message across in a way that people can relate to? Storytelling, like there's so many of those angles that if you can take those experiences back into your personal journeys as being an entrepreneur, now you're using that skill set. And if you tie that with, hey, you're a naturally driven person, now it's your skin in the game, right? So there's even more motivation to get after it for that.
So I think you started in like January and February of last year, right?
Yep.
And then remember how we were all hanging out like during March Madness, right?
yeah.
So it was legit. It's
At the
crazy.
spot in the center. Yeah.
Right.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
dude. So like legit,
That's
you
a
go
go-to
from
spot.
literally,
Right.
right? Having, not really gotten into this, you start doing it, whatever. Obviously seem like you're doing a lot, to literally 2 months later, hanging out with people, who are doing it full time, who are really making moves. Like our friend Dan just did 400K in December. He was there. Obviously, PB Flips, the GOAT, out in Pittsburgh doing his thing, right? And you just see how like that compressed, that 60-day period was more real life interaction and probably just natural learning osmosis than most Amazon sellers get in years, right? And the irony was that it wasn't that hard. You just gave yourself a chance to capture it, right? Off making a joke here and there, speaking up in a call here and there, tossing something up on the timeline here and there. Like it wasn't that bad, but just to kind of further dig in on that, like, can you break down like the whole time management system? Because I'm sure that's like, I'm actually positive that's one of the main things people are kind of worried about in regards to, okay, I know this works. I really want to make it happen. I'm just not sure I have the capacity to, which is complete bullshit. But we want to, like, regardless, we want to show that it's possible.
So my mind works in weird ways with systems thinking. So I look at that like you're either you're time rich, you're time poor, you're cash rich, you're cash poor, right? It's literally a matrix there. So for me, I looked at it in the perspective, I know I'm time poor. So what is the way that I can maximize the most of it? So I kind of looked at it in the lens of, all right, I have a 4-hour time period that I know is dedicated for the Amazon business. Within that 4-hour time frame, how do I maximize it even more? All right, well, I know I'm driving into the office, and that's a 20-minute window both in and out. So let's utilize that as an opportunity to listen to Buy Box Bandits episodes, to have podcasts on, to have Audible. So now your time stacking.
Some Big Booty mix in there too.
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
low key. Yeah. Facts. Get some classics in there. Yeah.
Big booty 23, 24, not as big of a fan, but 23.
Completely agree. Completely agree too. Yeah.
And that's been the biggest thing. So I would say take away from that time stacking Are you going for a walk? Are you going through and you're in the car? Like find opportunities where you're already committed your time and see if there's some way that you can better yourself. The other aspect of it was time boxing certain intervals. So sourcing 2 hours of the 4, especially early on, is probably more a 4 of 4, but having certain areas where you're saying, okay, these are the things that I have to get done for the night, putting those on there, whether it's a Trello board, a 4x6, whatever the mechanism is that'll give you some structure to your night or your day, and put it into areas where, hey, if I go over this 2-hour window, I know I need to get this next thing done, and it needs to be done before midnight in my situation. So I would pivot to get that out of the way. And that's kind of how I structured my night, was try to think of those different items and use them as little mini wins to kind of keep going, especially early.
I almost feel like people get lost with too much time availability, because I know personally, and likely is the case for you, when I have a lot going on, when I'm the busiest, I'm the most dialed in.
That is unbelievably true.
Right,
Like,
because
for
I know I have
example,
less room for error. I'm just more mentally focused, more in tune in everything. And the more on my plate, the more productive I am, which is kind of sort of counterintuitive.
super
But
counterintuitive.
but the more productive I am at each individual piece, right?
Mhm.
Because in your case, the 4 hours, you have 4 hours. You got to sleep, you got to wife, all these sorts of things. You have to maximize that. So whether that be VAs or just sourcing more intuitively, more effectively, more comprehensively with those 4 hours, whatever it is, you just have to be more effective. You have to make the most of it. As we start to kind of transition to your individual business, your experience, A, give the viewers a sense of like what your operation looks like now, and B, to follow up, I want to get a sense of like, obviously you've grown a lot. What is that delta? What's the biggest thing that you've learned, or what would you teach yourself 1 month in, Nick, 2 months in, Nick, compared to what you know now and what you're really good at?
I'm going to start with the latter of that and then work back into the business journey. I would say if I was going to say to Nick last year, I'd say it's okay to, like, I felt like I was looking out at what everyone else's success was and then using that as like an internal. I remember about like 4 months in, I was looking at where the trajectory was going. And then I remember hitting a period where I hit a down month and being like, oh man, I did not have as good of a month. What did I do differently? Like kind of down on myself with it. And then I looked at it in the view of those months from start to where it was. And you see
Zoom
like
out. Yeah.
as a milestone, right? A quarter, a half a year, a full year. And you're able to see that journey or that story, and it just puts it back into perspective. So I would say, and this is going to be a common theme, I would tell myself last year, one word: patience. You're only competing against yourself, and the more pressure you put on yourself with it, the harder it is with it. Like this is a journey of not just months, it's years and
Yep.
decades with these things. So if you can put it in that type of lens and not put too much pressure on yourself, that also helps you in the personal side. Like I'll be honest, my wife and I have had conversations of trying to structure, like, what does this journey really look like? And this past year, we literally put the whiteboard up and did like, hey, this is our goals for this year, like family goals, business goals, and like health related things. Like these are the buckets that we want to make sure we have one item in there to be able to tackle. Where last year going into it was, we need to figure out what that structure was. There's difficult conversations, like trying to be able to find that. And I think that was a long-winded answer to say, having the patience and understanding that it's not going to be an overnight thing, and be able to kind of look at it in those key milestones as you go.
I love everything you just said. Like, I would say I learned the most in 2018 and 2019 when I started reading books, and 2020. But the irony is that in 2022, I made like over 30x the money I made in like 2018, right? You know what I mean? Just a couple years later, right? And such, and keep working on that and everything. And you know what I mean? The incremental gain you'd think would have been in those main years that I learned, but it took a couple years of applying them. The same thing goes with like the content stuff, man. Like I've been doing Foolish for Miles stuff basically daily for about 5 years. I remember February of 2019 was when I posted my first video, and you guys can literally scroll back on Instagram. It's there. I was doing an IG live with this dude, and I'm like,
Was this mullet or no mullet?
No. I was in college. This was in the dorm. This is in the dorm. Yeah. So this was pre. I'd probably just gotten it cut. Actually, and so taking a look at that holistically, right? So when you get started selling Amazon, this is how it is for most people, right? So you kind of just, you're sitting there on the computer doing it by yourself, trying to figure this thing out, right? What I think is kind of hard to understand is that a lot of our day-to-days in regards to selling Amazon, and yours, I assume, is the same way, is like a FaceTime with this guy, a FaceTime with that guy. XYZ deals happening next week. We're getting ready for it, right? We're going to be on it at 1 a.m. Not because it's going to sell out, but because we want to load up some of the stuff that we know is probably going to sell out. So can you kind of describe and quantify what your day-to-day looks like in regards to selling Amazon? Because it's very different than what it is for most people, but you and I would say we are an example of what I think people should aspire to do in terms of like work-life balance around it, and also just having fun with it too.
Yeah, I think so. I kind of look at them in different stages. So in the aggressive growth stage, I think it's a lot more of that collaboration on the Zoom calls, right? Being able to figure out what's the book of record, what are the different sales cycles that are going on, and getting into that rhythm with the core group, the mastermind that you have. As things go on, you still have those, but then there's also each one of the members of your group, if you have a good group, are also looking at other opportunities. So now you're structuring some deep focus time to go out and figure out what are all those new.
But they're finding you though in a certain way though. They're finding you for sure too.
Mm-hmm. And that's been the biggest thing, because now you're having conversations around a specific area that you're like, hey, I might not be as strong in this point, so I'm going to focus over here. And then I'm going to tap into someone else in the core group where they are strong. So now we're having conversations and Zooms around those items. So it's becoming less on the tactical of what's the specific products that you're going after. And now it's talking about areas where you're being more strategic. Like, what do we think this particular product's going to look like in 3 months? Like, when is the right time to be purchasing this? Because we know down the line is going to be the great time to sell it. Thinking through like, hey, we're getting ready to get our books and our taxes. What are things that you guys are thinking about that we should be considering? So that, I think that's the biggest aspect, is the conversations in the Zoom calls, they evolve over time. And now the types of conversations you have are higher level concepts, as opposed to just the day-to-day. And that's not an overnight thing, right? You have to go through each of those stages to then be able to figure out like, okay, what's the next thing we want to collaborate on?
Well, there's a massive polarity because it's either the most brain dead banter and memes. Like we have the main group chat, and then we also have the Instagram, the meme chat too, right? Which Steven and Max contribute to a lot, right? And such. And the irony in that squad essentially is that like none of you guys paid each other anything. Right. It's all just completely organically. It came together. Right. We've had a couple of those dinners in PA and such. Right. And everything, and everyone's just kind of cool with each other. But all of you guys existed to the point where you gave yourselves a chance to find each other. Right. And that's why it was like a beautiful organic thing, because tons of people follow you on Twitter that you'll probably never talk to, just the way things work. But you existed enough to where you found those people that you really vibe with and such. Right. And it is so similar to being on a sports team, right? You get like the locker room banter, right? The memes, etc. And then when the bright lights are on, when the cool sale starts, you know, we're right there with this.
Everyone's dug in the trenches, locked in.
So another cool thing that you've done a little bit is like just thinking kind of beyond purely selling on Amazon, which I think everyone should do, and I think very few people do actually. So how do you think about like different projects around? Like I know you made a Chrome extension and stuff. Like talk some more about the long-term vision, man.
So first thing is the vision statement. So there's a lot of opportunities, the more that you can exist in the community that are going to come across. So it's being pragmatic to say, what is the one thing you know and the one thing you want to work on? That's my vision and goal for this year. And I think it's something to use as a framework for each year is, so for this year, the one thing that I've actually always known about through the corporate side is the software. Specifically put that onto the side over the past year to really learn about Amazon. Now this year, it's to spend a little bit more time thinking about what are different capabilities or solutions that could be put out that are valuable for the Amazon community. So that's really the goal for this year, is continuing to leverage and build upon the Amazon business to doing those leveling up activities, but then also thinking through, hey, there's going to be a lot of learning to figure out how to be a business owner in that space. Go learn what sales are like. Go learn how to be customer first and put the roadmaps together of the types of features that people actually want and either makes them money or solves a problem. It comes down to those types of things. And until you go through that learning journey, starting from zero again, You won't know that. But the thing that's been really cool with that, getting back to removing limiting mindset, is I wouldn't have done that before. Now it's like, okay, this
Your
is going to be,
mind's
but
expanding.
let's
You
go
see
try.
what you're capable. The more you do,
What's
the more you
evolved.
know you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool how it evolves. Like personally for me, like obviously I started as an Amazon seller. Then obviously Miles and I tried the prep center route. That
But
didn't
it didn't
necessarily
work. But
work.
who cares? Who cares?
Yeah,
Like
and then
4
I'm
years,
like
dude.
I'm doing a bunch of distribution now, which is working, which is doing really, really well. Right. And obviously we do some coaching and things like that. And for you, like you're kind of evolving in the same way, right?
And way quicker than we did too, dude. Because
Yeah.
I did literally content for 3 years before I made even like 5-10 grand a month from it.
But like so
Like,
many people talk about like, oh, I don't want to be going to the outlets for the next 20 years. You don't necessarily have to if you position yourself like Nick did, if you position yourself like
oh
we
yeah, you
did.
shouldn't be. You should plan on not even for yeah, you absolutely shouldn't plan on doing that. But you have to fight those outside forces in your life that are like, oh my gosh, you're scanning books. You're trying to buy textbooks off people in the library at college. You're gonna do that for 40 years. You're gonna leave college early and you just keep those blinders on. Shout out B flips right there, and you keep it rolling. And so can you talk about the Chrome extension you made too?
Yeah, so that I used as, so there's a concept. It's probably branded in some corporate book or somewhere out there, but essentially it's your 4 hour flex time, right? It's your you take a 4 hour focused window to be able to look at something that you're not normally doing, and that really comes around when you feel like you're stagnant. You're going to have a moment in your journey, probably multiple, where you're like, I'm not really making progress, and it's time to take the next step. So that was an opportunity that I saw. Okay, let's actually try to blend the worlds a little bit and see if there's a demand there. So I just took a Sunday to go through and spend 4 hours thinking of, hey, what was the problem that I needed to solve last year on my Amazon journey? And I had some scripts that I wrote. You know, I started with that journey of going through and trying to scrape sites and whatnot. And I was like, hey, let me just do this right. Like, manually source it, understand how things are. And then I use that as an opportunity. Well, what was the commonality that existed there? People need to know about stock counts. You want to know what are the different things that are in stock versus out of stock. How many of it can I buy in a single transaction? So there's certain data points or decisions that you're going to make as you do a purchase. So I kind of focused on that as the lens and used it as an opportunity to see, hey, does the community actually find this valuable? And that's where I think going into this year, I'm going to look to lean into opportunities to solve one problem, right? Tackle one very specific problem and see if there's demand from the community standpoint to say, hey, is this something actually worth developing? Does it make your life easier?
Yeah,
What
I
do you
have a
think, in your opinion, is the biggest problem for OA sellers?
Ooh, that's a good question. So
aggregation of
coming up,
discounts. It's 1,000% that. It's a way to effectively find, track, and utilize all that stuff. Because that's the only thing that makes OA work.
create your
I
moat.
didn't interrupt there, but
That's
I think it's that. Yeah.
Yeah, creating your moat, and what are the different ways that you can establish your moat?
So a point I don't think I've ever made, but I think is something we kind of need to start bringing up, is essentially how once you get out of survival mode as an Amazon seller, which let's assume like leads and product to buy is like the food in this regard. Like once you're not starving, you can get your head above water and you start to see all these opportunities. I don't know how I never brought this up, but
This
this is a
boy's
new concept
spitting.
here. Yeah, right. You get your head above water and you start to see all these opportunities all over the place. Bang software, bang service here, bang book company thing here, right? You know, bang coaching, right? Etc. But it's like a 6, 12, 18, even multiple year process to get your head above water where like, I'm good at this. And now you can accelerate your journey to getting your head above water through other sellers, mentorship, etc. Right? But you need to go through that initial process. Literally everyone has to do it. There's no avoiding it. You need to get to the where you can see stuff other people can't, which takes a while. But once you get your head above water, you start to see all these different blue ocean opportunities in the space, right? That you get access to by taking the time to get good and by other people knowing you're good, having credibility, etc. Right? Which kind of plays hand in hand and such. Getting tactical the last few minutes here, man. Can you talk about some of the creative sourcing stuff, whether it be like scraping and stuff like that you've done? Because I think some people with tech background might be interested in some of that stuff, man.
All right, we want to go down the
Yeah,
route.
heavy.
Okay. So if here's something that you don't need to have any coding background, that everyone should be looking in their business. If you're not looking at ChatGPT and utilizing it effectively right now, that's an area that if you're going to pick one thing to learn in the tech space, go learn how to write effective prompts. And all that is you're utilizing it as an assistant for an area to be an expert in, right? So if you wanted to, let's say we use the example of scraping a website, right? I could go down the rabbit hole of technical, say you need to know the Python programming language, you need to use HTML,
or you need to be cool with someone who does.
Or you need to be
one
cool
of the
with
two.
someone
One
who
of the
does.
two. Yeah.
And so if you can do the same thing with just saying, hey, I would like you to be a software expert. Here are the type of sites I'm looking for. Can you write me a script on X? And use that as an iteration if that's a passion that you would want to get into for, being able to find a moat or an edge or in that space. Some other things that I like to use is Garrett has a ton of content on Keep a Product Finder. That was something that I drilled into in the Amazon journey after seeing a lot of those is, hey, I'm a data nerd. I like to look at these types of things. So grabbing brands on the sites that you like, a lot of the source code, you can right click on source code and find a list of the brands, take those up to 50 brands, drop it in Keep a Product Finder and separate it by hashtags. And now you have a list of up to 50 that you can start to source from. That was one of the examples I use is I didn't feel like copy and paste it. I'm lazy. So I looked at the code and I said, okay, I can grab them here and then use Chat GPT to say, hey, can you write me an Excel formula that'll take these 50 brands and put a hashtag between them? And then that will spit out the equation that you need that you put in there. So those were examples of where did I use tactical ways of using a programming background to solve a business need, which was how do I find products on Amazon? And that's kind of how I started blending the two different worlds together.
Yeah, and imagine how it's going to evolve too, because you're still only in month 12 in the industry, month 12, month 13, et cetera, right? We're all still very young. The space as a whole is pretty young as well, but it'll be neat, looking back on these conversations in the future as well. And so as we finish up here, man, where can people find you on social media?
Yep, I'm on Nick Spisak _ on all socials.
Cool. So check out the man right there. Got coming back to PA soon, so we'll have to link up. Hopefully some March Madness vibes too, and such. But yeah, man, proud to know you. Keep up the great work, and I think a phenomenal first year, and excited to see how things evolve. Thanks everyone for listening.